So the term empath is gaining more and more popularity. People, especially those new to spiritual or paths or awakenings or just becoming more aware, they will likely to come across this word. And it seems to be somewhat helpful for some people, especially those who are, as we can call, beginners or novices, or just very inexperienced and unknowledgeable about a lot of what is going on, the changes that they're perceiving, experiencing, and such. But as a label, as a concept, it can also be limiting. It can cause an attachment and cause us to overly identify with that term, with that label, and get caught up in it. So it has its benefits and it has its downsides as well. So it's very helpful to simply be aware of as much as this concept as we can, as with all concepts. If we're going to use it at all, then we need to definitely be aware of as much of it as possible, not just a little bit, and cling to that. So the word, after just doing a little bit of research, Google says that it somewhat originated in science fiction around the 1950s. And whereas we can't just believe everything Google says, so that may or may not be true. It may have older origins in that. But it also, it doesn't seem to become being used and become more popularized until maybe the 1970s, and much more recently around the year 2000. After that, it is just blown out of proportion, along with a lot of other terms like karma, meditation, spirituality. A lot of these words were like hardly ever used, if at all, until more recently. And then with the internet and everything, social media is just all gained so much popularity and expansion. The word empathy, which is directly related to empath, is a Greek word, it seems like, of Greek origin. Is the same with so many words, you will notice. If you look up the origins, roots of words, especially in the English language, most of them are going back to either Greek origins or Latin, possibly Sanskrit. So depending on what the word is, but a lot of it going back to some kind of ancient civilization or culture. So it's become a modernized word. We've taken it from some other culture and used it in our own way, through our own perspective. Well, the word empath, to be an empath, if you don't know already, it simply means we're able to pick up and feel or perceive in some way emotions and sometimes thoughts, just energy. We're able to pick up energy beyond our own body and mind, at least beyond the body. And so a lot of people, they start becoming more sensitive. And that's what's really happening here, to make this simplified for us all. When we say we're an empath, or if that person's an empath, or whatever, what we're really saying is that we have become more sensitive to energy. We're paying more attention to it, and it's affecting us, being perceived more than it was before. So beforehand, maybe, we were aware to the level 1 or 1%, and now we've become more sensitive, more aware. So now we're at 10%, or 20 or 30 or various levels of it, depending on the person, the circumstances, the awakening process, etc. So again, essentially we have just become more aware, more sensitive to energy. It was always there. We just simply weren't paying attention to it, or we just weren't able to perceive it yet. So either we were ignoring it or just weren't ready for it on some level. But now, obviously, we are. So we're picking up more energies, not just our own emotions and energy, but also outside again of the physical body, what we deem as our physical individual body. Now we're picking up beyond that. Our energy field has expanded beyond the skin and the flesh, and now we can go out further than before. And again, we're simply more aware of it than before. And that's a huge part of the awakening process, is simply becoming more aware, not just of our perceived individual reality and self, but beyond that. What is outside of this, what we perceive, what we think of and define as outside of ourselves. We're becoming more aware of that even. So it all ends up being part of the self. Eventually, we stop seeing it as, oh, we're picking up on this other individual or this individual out there. It more becomes, we're picking up just a broader expanse, a broader spectrum of energy. We don't need to label it as a person or an animal or a thing or a this or that. It just comes back to energy. We're simply picking up energy and being aware of it. So we need to be very careful with the labels that also come attached to being an empath. Whether it's narcissists, whether it's psychic vampires, whether it's any kind of term or concept or label that's being used to label somebody else. We get into this state of wanting to blame others for what we're feeling. The feelings and the energy become so intense, we want to push that onto somebody else. And maybe it does belong to somebody else's body and such. But we don't need to blame them. We don't need to make it all about them, because it comes back to ourselves. We're still picking it up. We're the ones perceiving it, feeling it, acknowledging it, aware of it, and hopefully observing it. And that's the huge part of an empath, is we need to learn to observe from the heart center. So not getting attached to what we're feeling or what we're perceiving, especially if it's new, exciting, intense. We need to be able to observe it without attachment, without labels, so we can truly learn from it. So we're not so busy trying to pinpoint who it's coming from and making it all about them and that one experience and holding on to that and just learning to block ourselves off from it. Because that's another thing that kind of comes with an empath nowadays, is a lot of people just tell you need to block your energy, you need to block those people, and that doesn't really resonate. I've been there, done that, and it is exhausting. You will find yourself constantly trying to block so much energy. You won't be able to exist because you're constantly trying to block stuff. Constantly. Trying to block this whole aspect of reality or perceived reality. And we just simply can't run away from it forever. You can't just block away what we don't like. It's exhausting, and we don't learn anything from it. Boundaries is a whole other thing. Boundaries can definitely be helpful at times. But at the same time, we need to learn to be free and just live.